This is Amy, and you're listening to the Talkin' Appalachian podcast. I am so excited to have Adriana Trigiani on the podcast for this episode. Adriana is someone that I've known for many years now. She and I were in Richmond together at the Library of Virginia recently, and it was an event for the Origin Project. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what that is. She was gracious enough to sit down with me after all of the things had culminated and all of that. She'd had a chance to talk to all the kids that came. And it was just a really nice conversation to have with her. I want to introduce Adriana to you by way of an essay that I wrote for a book called Step into the Circle, Writers in Modern Appalachia. And it was edited by Amy Green and Trent Thompson. It called upon some of us to write profiles of authors. And so they asked me to write a profile of Adriana Trigiani because Adriana's originally from Big Stone Gap, Virginia, and I live in Big Stone Gap, Virginia, but we've also known each other by way of her work in the Origin Project. So here goes. I live in Big Stone Gap, Virginia, 2 houses down from the stately 19th century home where Adriana Trigiani grew up. I pass the house every day as I walk my dog around the block, imagining a budding young writer hard at work at her desk in the late 1960s and early 1970s as she waits for the Wise County bookmobile to arrive. Born to a big Italian family, she left Big Stone Gap at age 18 and now lives in New York City. As of this publication, she's written 12 novels. Okay, I have to correct that because she's now up to 21. She's a powerhouse. She's written for television, film, and stage. She's written and directed 4 movies. She launched a travel and cosmetics business, and she co-founded a nonprofit program that serves thousands of young writers in Virginia. And as I said, she's also got a popular podcast called You Are What You Read. Adriana has used her influence and inspiration, nurtured by her own upbringing, to encourage kids to write about their communities and identities in this nonprofit writing program she co-founded with the late executive director, Nancy Bolmeier Fisher. She was a beautiful person. She was an absolute light in this program. The project began in far southwest Virginia and was embedded in the public school curriculum. It has since expanded toward Northern Virginia with more than 1,000 students who write from personal experience and interviews with family and community members. Students also benefit from workshops with well-known writers Adriana introduces to them, including Margot Lee Shetterly, Meg Wolitzer, Lori Eustace. In this past event, she brought journalist John Wilson and A.J. Jacobs and novelist Adrienne Brodeur to meet the kids and have workshops with teachers. TOP has published 15 volumes now of their student work about communities, families, and identities, in which they write about struggle, nostalgia, and everything in between. As writers and authors, their backgrounds and approaches to the craft of writing might be different, but somehow their storytelling and the essence of the truth and how they seek it is Appalachian, Trigiani says. That's what we strive to bring to the students. That's our hope.
You know, Amy, what it means to me is everything. It's really hard to explain. But I was so little when we moved to Big Stone Gap that to me it was like a magic forest. So, you imagine 5, 6-year-old, my baby sister was 1, the eldest sister was 9. I mean, we were a very solid, connected bunch of kids, but we were welcomed, but it was different. So when I think of Big Stone Gap, I think of the possibilities of things. And of course, when that bookmobile came down the mountain, well, I thought it was a magic coach, and I think I put that Big Stone Gap. Mm-hmm. I have a very romantic view of it because it was romantic to me. So when when people like to give me a little give me a little jab and say she has a romanticized view of it. Yeah, I do, because I love the people, and I felt everything was possible there. And I still do when I go home. I think I've told you this before, that my lungs open up like I can suddenly breathe again,
Well, it's a much different place than where you've been for a really long time. So we're here at the Library of Virginia for the Origin Project.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk about that too. And I wanted to anchor that in what being Appalachian means to you, because I think that's probably why that and the writer in you, why you started this organization 10 years ago.
It's now almost 15.
Oh, it's been almost 15. Wow.
I mean,
Time flies.
I know the time has flown. And, when we started this, I'm saying Nancy Bolmeier Fisher and I, she came to Big Stone. She flew from San Francisco to Big Stone Gap. So what happened was, you were my fantastic dialogue person on Big Stone Gap and helped us. And I called everybody I knew to help me. And I called Nancy and I said, there's a lot of kids around, and I'm wondering if they know what a treasure it is to grow up here. Do they get it? I was thinking, I don't know. Do they? And then we decided to go into the classroom, and we thought 9th to 12th grade, right? We were too late by 10 years. We needed to get the kids in pre-K if we could. So then we rejiggered it a little bit, but we've just learned as we've gone. And, my thing always was, one of the reasons I became a writer was because there was very little tools involved. It was free. And I have a funny story to tell you about that. I'm very musical, but the aforementioned Virginia McChesney taught everybody in town how to play instruments and stuff, and then she taught somebody else. And Pia played the guitar, and Mary played the piano, and then Michael played like a horn, or I don't even know. They were all doing it, and I didn't. I felt sorry for my parents, and I thought they can't afford to give me piano lessons. And on my dad's deathbed, you'll love this. He said, I wish you would have asked me for those piano lessons. They were $1 an hour. And I was like, $1? I was like horrified, because when you're little, you think everything costs a fortune, right? It's hysterical. Anyway, but I developed a musical sense. And I think a musical sense is a directing sense. And I think it's a writing sense. I think that it's I got all that in Big Stone Gap. So to me, Appalachian, Big Stone Gap is, first of all, if you're a learned person about Appalachia, you know that in Appalachia, it is the roots of all music, American music, dramatizing, storytelling. It is such a fusion of Scotland, Ireland, and then these wonderful, even Turkish, because of the French and Indian War. We got a lot of Turkish people through there. Our indigenous population is spectacular. And I just remember in Appalachia, the pride of that, when people would say that they were Indian, there was such pride about it. And then, of course, now what informs my youth and growing up was, of course, my Catholic faith. And that was like the island of misfit toys. I mean, you had people from all over the world, you had mixed race marriages. You had folks that converted. That we had an African American, Tense Mooney, and I've dramatized her in a book. But also the Filipino community. You know all this. It's like, so Appalachian is really still a mirror. It's really a mirror. And I actually said this to some politicians that I talked to. I said, we have to reverse this mindset of the word deplorable, because Appalachian is essential to the American story. So I haul a big wagon, and look, and I'm Italian, and of course that we don't have a lot of Italians down here. But if you start to dig in Appalachia, you find communities of Italian Americans. You just do. So
well, they were the stonemasons were Italian. All the wonderful old buildings that are still standing are the evidence of the stonemasons that came in.
Our old school was built a bit, and there was a bond drive, and I was a little kid when that happened. They wanted new schools because they said these schools are decrepit. And my father really fought to keep schools. And a kid came up to me at school and said, you need to tell your father to back off, because we need new schools. and he doesn't want us to have them. And I went home, and my father tried to explain to me, but when you're 10 years old, you're like, I'm getting picked on at school because of the way you think. But wouldn't it be great if we had those as community centers now, and offices and buildings to put apartments in?
Yes.
We have such an aging population. We needed them. Look, but now we have a Burger King and a grocery store. I guess this is just good.
I just spoke in Lee County to the town. And the Historical Society did. My old elementary school was built in 1911, and it's empty now. And so they're trying to figure out what to do with it. And we're trying to restore it and turn it into a community center and maybe apartments or things like that. It's a beautiful, big, old structure. So when you say that, you're singing my song.
Also just keep the old building and build a new one if you need additional.
Yeah.
You're going to get that financing and funding anyway from wherever it comes from, the state and the county. So why not have that beautiful old building there?
They tell stories. We went on a tour.
Vibes in there, vibes.
There are mounds and mounds of Virginia record books from the 1930s with children's names and grades. 1932 and 1933, just laying in there. And all I wanted to do was sit and read them. I just wanted to sit and look at the names. I mean, that's
hopefully,
very special.
You do have the African American Museum down there now that Ron runs, and you can always call the Southwest Virginia Museum. They're so good about that.
Oh, yeah.
But Lee County's got some, Lee County is magnificent.
Barbara Kingsolver and I talked a lot about Lee County because she
was so inspired by it. We just laughed because she goes Devil's Bathtub. I said, I know where everything it was in Demon Copperhead, which was such a masterpiece. That's an American masterpiece. And, there's another thing I have to say about Appalachia. I mean, I believe you have the greatest living American novelist living in Appalachia, and Barbara Kingsolver. I've always said it, and I still believe it. They don't make them like her. So, Appalachia's loaded. You're there. Got a lot of towns down there, a lot of great professors, a lot of schools of thought and musicians and, seekers. And it's kind of getting popular for people to move back. So that's exciting.
So you mentioned Barbara Kingsolver and literary masterpieces. And so I wanted to ask you about your podcast because you've written, 18, 19 bestsellers, and you've 4 movies you've directed and written. So you made it. You made it a long time ago. So what made you want to do this podcast that is so popular? And you've had Joyce Carol. I mean, you've had literary heroes and also
people maybe you don't
A-list actors. I mean, it's wonderful. Like, it's a treat every time one pops up. It's a treat, and you're so good at it. So what inspired you to do that?
Well, I would say that my podcast is Appalachian because it's about gratitude. I mean, I've done all right, and I've been treated really well. I'm not going to say it's easy because then I'd be lying. But I've had a lot of luck, and that's part of it. And so I wanted to give back, and it started kind of during the pandemic. I just called people, and they'd call me crying, I have a book coming out. I don't know how to. I said, well, let's just. There were other. Listen, I have so many author friends who were doing it, and were kind of like nudging me and saying, "Do it," and just great people, all helping each other. Caroline Levitt over there, that Blaze, the big raging Blaze, and friends in fiction. All my girlfriends over there, Mary Kay Andrews, that crew, Patty, Kristen, and Christy. And everybody was doing it, and everybody helps each other. What's more Appalachian than that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really true. I mean, it's the community you long for. And I believe you can have it anywhere. I really do. And of course, the immigrant communities that come in, we know this, they just reinforce that family feeling. They reinforce it. So that's all beautiful. So I would say, and I love talking to people. I like to hear about them. And because I'm such a talk show person since I was little, I mean, I love talk shows. During the pandemic, I watched all of Dick Cavett, all of them. Fell in love with Orson Welles, whole thing. And I realized how to do it from that. You can't talk about your book. You can't talk about, or some, you got to get them to talk. And some people don't want to talk. So you know this. It's just like you got to, whether it's your podcast or your teaching or or you're doing anything in public where you're giving a speech or anything, it has to be about the people you're talking to, or you're not gonna.
Right.
They're going to go to sleep. So I started it that way, and then I just called people I really want to talk to. That's the beauty. If I don't like them, I have to.
Like,
Yeah, if I don't like somebody, what's the point of that? And now listen. Have I had a couple of clinkers? Sure. Not too many, but one lady who's considered the tops in literary, I got off of that one and I went, she not only did she not say anything, she had an attitude. And it was like, you know what? You don't understand this yet. You don't understand, you know that there's many. I mean, you wrote Talking Appalachian, so you know how people feel about people just because of their accent.
mm-hmm.
And in the book world, it's just as snobby. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and I think to myself, well, we're doing the categories: literary fiction, women's fiction, romance. I mean, come on now. But they don't do that to the men.
No, they
They
don't.
really don't. There's no men's fiction. Well, here's the secret. The reason for that is, and we know this also growing up in Appalachia, is the women do the heavy lifting. I mean, the men might have gone into the coal mine, but the women they were hauling the wagon.
They were.
And not to take anything away from those beautiful men, but my point is, give credit.
Right.
Give credit, give honor, and give recognition.
Right. It might be the movie she made in Big Stone Gap that will be her lasting love letter to her Appalachian town. For over a decade, she passed up opportunities to make the movie in places that were more convenient, less expensive, and outside the United States. The movie, she said, belonged to the people of Big Stone Gap. She wanted the people of her town, people she'd grown up with, to be immortalized on screen. She had a role for everyone, even me. A year before, I'd published a book about the many ways we speak English in the Appalachian region. And of course, that became this podcast. Before she began filming, she called me and asked if I'd consider reading the script and do a kind of phonetic rendering of some of the words in case the actors needed a bit of reminding on how to say things like married, which people around here might say murried, as if they'd grown up in Central Appalachia. She made all of us feel as if we were necessary to this movie, becoming what she envisioned. It was as much about the place as the story. We cried to see Mutual Drug, which had closed its doors for a good part of the year before, reopened and stocked, just as it would have been in the 1970s. To see our main street featured just the way it is, the Southwest Virginia Museum, the landscape we drive through on the way to work every morning, all immortalized on screen. The community answered casting calls to film wedding scenes, the outdoor drama scenes, Christmas decorating in the museum. Those famous actors, Whoopi Goldberg, Ashley Judd, Patrick Wilson, and so many others, lived among us, shopped in our markets, spent time in the local bookstore. When we watched the movie for the first time, we pointed and smiled and laughed to see ourselves. We shared it with people we loved. We sat in the dark through all the credits just to see names from our town scroll up the screen. Then Adriana did something else. She held a red carpet event for the town. The actors came back and celebrated with us, took selfies with us, and smiled with us in streets that had not been that full since the 1940s and 50s. It's quiet again in Big Stone Gap. But every now and then, some tourists will come through because of her books or the movie. The set of Carmine's is now a shiny visitor center where we hold block parties and movie nights and jam sessions and community events. She did something that most authors, whose places are based on their beloved hometowns, probably dream of being able to do. The novel is a solitary act of creation, as is reading, but the novel as film brought us together in a different way that may keep us bound together for generations. Circle back to Big Stone Gap. So it has been 10 years since you made the movie, right? I was telling
10 years since it came out.
Since the movie came out in 2014.
But since we filmed it in the fall of 2013.
Okay.
The original Big Stone Gap, there were three sequels.
Right.
But Big Stone Gap came out in the year 2000. That's thank goodness, because I can do the math. So it came out in the year 2000. But what preceded that was like years of work. And then once I got published, it's been you know
Yes.
this. We're in the cheese factory. So basically it's been 2013. So this is what,
So
2024?
that's 12 years.
That's 12 years, yeah.
I
But
mean,
it's
11
10 years,
years.
but we
I
celebrate
can't do math.
when it first was debuted, premiered in a theater. So it'll be 10 years ago next summer.
Okay. I didn't know if you were planning anything or if you wanted to say anything about.
I would like to say, we want to have a real hoedown and celebrate it. And I'll call all the actors and beg them to come back home and see what we can do. You know, Amy, you were there, it was so wild, so great,
It was
so
wonderful to be part of
wonderful.
that.
The town, it was alive and on fire, and it was
Mhm.
just. And I have so many friends back home, who never acted and made them act in the movies. But it's like, for me, if it isn't fun, and I mean, listen, we made it on a shoestring, and I had one camera. One camera. I just went to visit my friend on his television set in New York City, and there were 5 cameras to shoot a scene at a coffee shop. And I thought to myself, I kept begging, can I have another camera? Can I have another camera? So that'll tell you the brilliance of that director. Not the director. I'm saying director of photography, not me. I mean, it was unbelievable what he did. I still can't get over it. I mean, a lot of times I played the master because that's all I had time to get.
Mhm.
My coverage was not what it always should have been, but I didn't have the resources for that. But I'm still very proud of it. The critics hated it. What critics even looked at it? I remember the producer came and the New York Times had chose it they had this thing called years or something. And we did a big, and it sold out in New York City in 2 seconds. The seats were gone.
Mhm.
And then there's a story there. But then they didn't review it. And I remember a producer saying, you're better off, as if I would get a bad review. And I said, there's something you don't understand about me. I wanted to see that movie in the New York Times. Not for me. I don't care. I was bulletproof. I was a novelist. I make a bad movie. What's it going to do to me? But it's a beautiful little movie.
It's a beautiful movie, for sure.
It really is.
And you gave us something, and when I say us, I mean Big Stone Gap, Southwest
Mhm.
Virginia, Appalachia. You gave us something. You created something and made us part of it that we will forever talk about, and we'll tell our children and our children's children and our children's children's children. I mean, you created a love letter to the place that you came from, and nobody can take that away. The critics can't take that away.
Never.
You know.
And I just had a director that I talked to, Suzanne Beer, and she said something so beautiful. And I said, and it made me think of Big Stone Gap, and I'm going to think of it in this light always. She said, you don't film life when you make a movie, you catch it. That's all I tried to do. It is no credit to me if you love that movie. That movie is a credit to that story and those characters that played in it, because they brought it to life. I think Ashley Judd was I think it's Ashley's greatest role. I really do. And she's done some brilliant stuff. Patrick Wilson, fantastic. Every single person in that movie. Now I'm going to go down the rabbit hole because I have to say Whoopi Goldberg, Jane Krakowski, Paul Wilson, let me keep going. Judy Ivy. My gosh, she was so great in it. All the local people that were in it that just had never acted and just did it. Anthony LaPaglia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Tony was incredible. I mean, this is an incredible group of people. And Jenna Elfman. Everybody, Jenna Elfman still has fans back home. They miss her. I see them post to her and stuff. They love her, and they should. She's fantastic. John Benjamin Hickey. I mean, he embodied the foreigner that comes in and directs the band. Everything about it I really loved. And, time is kind to movies. Time helps you. As people call you and go, I love that movie. Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did. Because it was made with love, what else can you do?
It's a beautiful movie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Adriana, for all you do. And I love you so much.
I love you, Amy.
And I speak for a lot of people when I say that, because you're just an amazing person all the way around. And the fact that we're here and what you've done today is testament to that.
And we're going to cook up more stuff back home.
Okay. If you're like me, you look forward to that first cup of good coffee in the morning, especially when the weather turns cool. And because I love coffee and local businesses, I'm excited that we're partnering with Appalachian Mercantile to tell you about Preacher Creek Coffee. Go get yourself a bag of the Talkin' Appalachian edition, fresh roasted coffee beans at Appalachian Mercantile. Have a hot cup with breakfast or get an iced latte with one of their delicious fresh lunches. Appalachian Mercantile in downtown Appalachia, Virginia, the only town with the region's name.